What up, all you sci-fi simps and kaiju queens? Welcome to another episode of The World is My Burrito, aka Twimby, a podcast where I pick topics across infinite dimensions, transport them to the burrito dimension, dissect them in the name of scientific advancements, then send the remaining bits back to you because it's not like you're doing anything better. As always, I am your host, Corey T, coming at you from Tampa, Florida, this lovely April 10th. Today, I'm blessing you with another Let's Talk About It conversation featuring Erik Slader concerning John Scalzi's most recent novel, Kaiju Preservation Society. This will not be a There will not be a video recording because of reasons. The main one being that I didn't record video during this convo. It's not really that complex of a reason. Before we cross that quantum threshold, let's take care of some kitchen keeping. House maintenance has been keeping me down and photo work is slowly picking up, so my delays with the podcast have at least been productive elsewhere. Following this episode will hopefully be my Ghosts of Tsushima crossover episode with Erik Slader. This is the long-awaited sequel to the Epik Fails episode we recorded in 2022 covering the history of the Mongolian invasions of Japan. After that will either be Naoki Urasawa's Pluto or another surprising yet very relevant Let's Talk About It episode with a new friend of the show. Or both, because having more than one thing in the chute sure is nice. I'm still trying to find that better balance between long and short episodes because, holy shit, research is fun, but no surprise, it still often takes hours to get very few unique or even useful notes about a topic. That's just the nature of this beast. Anyway, let's get the factual delivery process started with some author history. John Scalzi, born May 10th, 1965, is a prolific American author with his claim to fame being science fiction. His body of work is holy shit levels of long, ranging from fiction novels and novellas to nonfiction, anthologies, interactive digital graphic novels, and more. For that reason, I'll keep the list down to a few things you may know best. Old Man's War is a sci-fi series branching across 6 novels. Red Shirts is supposed to be a great Star Trek-inspired novel, but I wouldn't know because I'm not a Trekkie. 3 of the episodes from Love, Death, and Robots Season 1 are based on his works. If you're into sci-fi or Netflix and chill, you've heard of one of those. I'll include a link to his body of work in the notes because maybe you've read something and didn't even know it, but make sure you do read something of his. Blazing right on through this, let's get to some book history. Scalzi's monstrous inspiration stems from his childhood, where he watched movies like Godzilla, Mothra, and Gamera on his local TV. Homeboy was living the dream, watching stuff on the telly, while I had to dig around at the library, yard sales, and thrift stores. But that does mean he was stuck with only the English edits and dubs, so I can't be too mad. His dumb child brain couldn't separate fiction from reality, so he often pondered, why would anyone live in Tokyo where these monsters are always attacking? Which is the kind of magic their creators wanted to invoke, and a magic that I feel our current topic captures. The core concept of the book was, what if we were the interlopers in a kaiju world as opposed to the common inverse? It's not a new take, it's not a hot take, but the human race are generally not the invaders when it comes to kaiju tales, so this was very welcome. Erik and I cover a little bit more, so maybe it's about time to do the damn thing. Erik, how you doing today, bud?
Doing awesome, man. Glad to be here. Glad to be back.
Thanks for joining me. You are the most frequent guest. Actually, you're probably the only return guest I think I have on the podcast.
Oh, that's a huge honor, man. I enjoy listening to your pod. Looking forward to new episodes. I'm glad you're back at it, giving us more of that good burrito content.
It's always good to have the constant motivation from like epic fails and podcasters assemble to be like, yeah, I need to get my shit together and do this.
I try. It's funny. People just assume I have my shit together, and trust me, I don't.
You're
Constant
you're in the
stress.
dump truck that is getting everyone else's shit together.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, you're driving it, man. Got that.
I will say though, you need to look into possibly doing like a sponsorship with Sushi Burrito, because holy shit, is that some synergy?
That would be good. So the main reason for those listening, the main reason I have Erik with me on this podcast today, it's not just because Erik has read this book. But Erik is actually the one who sent me a link to it forever ago. But let's see, it was sometime in 2021. He shot me a link to Subterranean Press.
That's right.
And it took me, I didn't know what this was. I'd recognize Scalzi's name, wasn't familiar with him. Some of his works had been recommended by one of my brothers. And then Erik sent me this. And so it's funny, actually, at the time, I didn't recognize Scalzi's name when I ordered it.
Oh.
Because it wasn't like fully cemented. Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, as is tradition, it took a while for me to order it. And then it took a few months for it to arrive. And it came in around March of 2022.
Oh, you must have pre-ordered it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, you sent me the pre-order link, so I definitely did.
That's right.
And then I saw the name, and it's like, oh shit, I recognize this name now. He did Red Shirts and I think Old Man's War.
That's right. Yeah, two of my favorites of his.
So, and it took me until May to start reading it, and I think I finished it in like a week. Yeah.
It's a fast read.
Oh yeah, it's very fast. But Erik is the reason that I got into this. I don't remember if I paid more for it or not, but I got a signed copy from Scalzi.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
Yeah, so it was really cool to get it in. But Erik, I think part of the reason that you recommended this to me is that you are more familiar with John Scalzi. So tell me a little bit about your history with the guy who wrote this book.
Sure. So I've read a few of his books, and you called out two of my favorites prior to this, which were Old Man's War and Red Shirts, which couldn't be more different, by the way. Old Man's War is great, but it's a more kind of, I would say, more of a serious sci-fi take. It's a kind of like a Starship Troopers kind of thing, but it's really interesting. One thing you'll notice from his books, the more you get into him, is that everything has a social commentary going on. And it's not always like in your face about it, but there's definitely deeper meaning to his work, which I love that kind of shit. Red Shirts really surprised me because you go in thinking it's like this, a spoof of TOS, like it's got all the Star Trek tropes and everything. And it is that. It is funny on a surface level. But when you really get into it, when you start reading it, like as it goes on, it gets a little darker and more introspective. As the story went on, it got really meta. It started to delve into some pretty deep themes about trauma, loss, and the nature of reality. So I definitely can't recommend that one enough. It's weird though, because like when I first read it, I wasn't sure if I liked it. I had to reread it, and then I was like, shit, this is brilliant, And
I think that's the sign of a good book.
Yeah.
When you have to come back.
Yeah, definitely. And so when I heard about Kaiju Preservation Society, I knew that I was going to grab this as soon as I got a chance. And I don't regret it at all. It's great.
Yeah, I know my first impression was, I don't know, I saw it and it's like, man, like, I wonder what this is going to be. Is this really going to be something worth reading? Because this is my first Scalzi read. I haven't actually done Old Man's War, and I think that's a trilogy, right?
Yeah, there's a few of them. I actually still need to finish that.
So I haven't read that, but I was like, it's a cheap book, and I know you like them. I dig your recommendations, so I pulled the trigger on it, and it did end up being a very fun read. and without spoiling it, I think the true charm of this book, for me personally, came with the afterword.
Oh yeah, same actually. That really hit me hard. Do you want to get into that now or after?
So I would say before hopping into spoilers, who would you recommend this to?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So, if you're a fan, I would say if you're a fan of kaiju movies, if you're a fan of Godzilla or even Jurassic Park, like if you liked both the book and the movie of Jurassic Park, then I think this might be for you. Although I will say it's a little bit lighter, you know, it's not quite as scientifically heavy, if that makes sense, but it's got that sense of adventure and, you know, there's a lot of metaphors about like, you know, the evil corporations, the world, capitalism and all that. Science gone awry, you know. But yeah, no, if you like that stuff, definitely I would say check it out. If you really enjoyed reading Ready Player One, I think this is kind of in that same vein a little bit, if that makes sense. They're not very similar, but maybe tonally.
I think it's presentation. So I would recommend this. Anyone who's like obviously a kaiju fan, definitely get it. And I think Jurassic Park is a perfect kind of pickup as well. And then young readers, because it's not a very complex read.
No, and it's pretty short. It's not super dense, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It is a really short read. It's written in a way that it's just easy to consume it.
Definitely. I think it was described by someone in a review as like sci-fi as a pop song. Like you can pick it up and, you know, revisit it whenever you want, you know?
Yeah. And I was thinking, I don't know why food came to mind, but to me, it's like fancy ramen.
Ooh, yeah.
Like homemade ramen where the base of it is extremely basic.
Yes.
But then, you know, you throw like your own egg in there, you throw in some green onions and stuff, and you have these other flavors that pop.
Yeah, that's great.
But it's still not complex. There are some complex parts to it.
Yeah.
Which we'll get into, but I think overall it's just still easy to eat. And for a young reader, those complex flavors don't really matter. But I feel like if you have more of an observation of the world around you, then you'll notice those flavors a little bit more.
Definitely. And so that's actually, I think, a really perfect metaphor for this, because Scalzi, he's great at really layering meaning into what otherwise might be seen as like a funny, dumb, turn your brain off popcorn movie of a book. You know, so yeah, that's perfect.
How would you describe the tale again without spoiling it yet?
Okay, so I guess before I do that, I just want to, well, I don't know when's a good time to bring this up, but I love the cover of this book.
Yeah, that is a good start.
I think that's worth mentioning.
Yeah.
The bloody name tag, the font, the subtle hints at a jungle setting, like that right there sold me instantly. Regardless of the author, like I knew I was going to read this, but I was like really excited just by that.
They, and I think that is the kind of thing that hooked me as well. When I first saw it, when I first saw it, I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about this cover. But I remember when it finally came in, because basically I looked at it and then I think I looked at it a second time to order it, but not really looking at it. And then when it came in, I opened it up and I held it in my hand and I was like, I actually really like this. And you mentioned Jurassic Park earlier.
Yeah.
And that is it feels almost like a 90s cover.
Definitely.
Like you said, it's a bloody name tag, which is very apropos of Jurassic Park.
Oh yeah. Exactly.
So it's
my jam.
Minimal, and it does stand out on a bookshelf.
Definitely.
And I don't know, I thought I was going to mention this later, but it is worth mentioning now that they have released a second cover for it. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have, yeah. It's kind of cool. It's like the silhouette of a kaiju, I think.
Yeah.
And I like it, but I don't like it as much, if that makes sense.
To me, it kind of, I don't know. I feel like it ruins the imagination of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I'm kind of with you on that.
Because there's more, it's not a mystery book, but there is more of a mystery to the cover. of, and you see the title Kaiju Preservation Society, and it's like, it makes you wonder what is it I'm about to get into.
Exactly.
Whereas the updated cover, and it just released in like January of 2023. So it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's a cheaper looking cover.
Definitely.
Oddly enough, it feels like that should have been the first cover, and that the first cover should be the second, like the recreated cover.
Oh, I totally agree. I also want to mention real quick that I did the audiobook for this one on Audible. And I do highly recommend it if you like audiobooks. Will Wheaton does the narration. He does a fantastic job.
I'll get into it later, but I did want to talk about the audiobook because I did both read the physical copy and then for this episode, listen to the audiobook.
Oh, nice.
So how would you sum up the synopsis?
Sure.
Again, without you doing any spoilers.
Okay, I'll do my best.
I mean, the title of the book is Kaiju Preservation Society. So
we kind of know.
There are things that are spoiled for us that are not spoiled for the people in the book.
So the book is it's set during the COVID pandemic, and we got this main character, Jamie, who is basically fired from his job at a tech company and becomes what they call a deliberator to make ends meet. But during his job, he gets a chance to join a top secret animal preservation group. He knows nothing about it, but they have to sign a non-disclosure agreement and aren't allowed to say anything on social media. No one seems to know what they're getting into, but it turns out they're being transported to an alternate dimension where kaiju roam the earth. I think that's all I can say. Maybe I said too much already, but
maybe I might have to bleep some of that out.
Okay.
Can't give away too much.
Sorry.
So I basically summarized this as like a Kong or Mothra-esque tale of corporations, and in modern times, just absurdly rich people capitalizing on kaiju, but with a twist.
Yes. In fact, I was kind of worried if that would be considered a spoiler, but
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe I'll have to drop the spoiler before the spoiler. But yeah, I did feel there was that fun of, corporations, because it becomes a big thing later, but, corporations
for sure
having a big hand in stuff. And in this one, and again, it's more to our modern age, absurdly rich people that don't even need a corporation anymore because they have so much money.
Oh, agreed. I'll wait till you drop that spoiler more.
If you don't want your world infested with cosmic horrors whose appearance extends beyond the vernacular of man, then go ahead and put this bizarre burrito back in your trans-dimensional fridge. Go check out the book. Kaiju Preservation Society is readily available in physical, digital, and audio formats. You have been warned! Basically, the beginning to end synopsis is, the MC, Jamie, gets fired from her job, and through happenstance and meeting old college friends, gets another job to go take care of large creatures in Greenland. Then surprise, surprise, it's all a front. Greenland contains a literal door to an alternate Earth where there are kaiju. And that's when they learn the character Jamie and then her cohorts that she meets, Niam, Kaharangi, and Aparna. They learn that KPS stands for Kaiju Preservation Society.
Yep.
From here, we get kind of walk through the world, which is pretty well developed. Some shit happens. Some shit gets resolved. There's like a little bit of foreshadowing drama that towards the end of the book becomes like super mega drama where the kaiju end up back on Earth, our Earth, regular Earth.
Yeah.
And then everything gets resolved and almost everyone is happy, except for those who died.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, they're probably not unhappy. They are dead.
Yeah. Well said.
So I do want to talk about the world that is built because, again, with the whole like ramen thing, it's like a big old bowl of ramen. There is a lot of world. And I think Scalzi does a marvelous job of giving you just enough to feel like you're there without doing like Tolkien levels of lore building.
Definitely.
So how do you feel about the world? What are some opinions on that?
I thought it was really interesting. It felt like it really spoke to our current times, if that makes sense. I mean, the fact that it's set during the pandemic, like that whole initial few chapters, you know, it was very relatable for those of us that went through all that shit. And, you know, I think the whole book really works as like a metaphor for the worst parts of capitalism run amok. And it's interesting because there's the very mundane subplot about the evil corporate guy who, you know, had this food app and then he fired everyone, sold it to another company. Like that's like some real world stuff, but it's also like kind of like foreshadowing to what's going on later on. And it actually ends up connecting in an interesting way.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be connected, and then it does seem like it's going to be connected.
Yeah.
And he does like a good job kind of separating. God, even though I think it's like right in the same spot, but it feels like Scalzi kind of separates who ends up becoming the main bad guy from like how he becomes the main bad guy.
Yes. Exactly.
So then you're like, okay, well, I guess he's not the main bad guy because he leaves, and then like, surprise, he's the main bad guy.
I thought that was brilliant because you meet him in chapter 1. That's like the opening of the book, isn't it?
Yeah.
That conversation between them, and
It's literally like the opening of the book is Jamie getting fired.
What a scumbag! I loved that though, you know. But yeah, so. As far as world building with Kaiju Earth, I thought that was incredible. It felt like Skull Island, you know? There was so much unique stuff going on there. And I'm glad they didn't just like, Scalzi wasn't lazy about it, you know? He really thought about this and he came up with some interesting things as far as like how the Kaiju operate, why this Earth is different. Really interesting because he describes the Kaiju as an ecosystem within themselves in a way, and they're like kind of this natural nuclear power plant, which I thought was really fucking cool.
I think that was the single best bit of sci-fi in here.
Yes,
because there's plenty of stuff going on, but I love that idea that, you know, he has some very soft science of how they actually can survive in their real world. But the Kaiju's developing, and honestly, it was very like expounded upon because they have their own nuclear reactors, and then parasites. Well, we call them parasites, but it essentially becomes like a relationship that the parasites also help kind of evacuate like some of this nuclear energy, so that the Kaiju can go on living without their internal reactor exploding.
Yeah, exactly.
And then eventually, you know, when the time comes, or if they've taken enough damage, as we learn in the book, or when they reach, you know, the time to die age, the parasites evacuate. Like the Kaiju go off somewhere in a futile attempt to evacuate some of this heat, but then eventually explode.
Yeah, no, definitely.
But yeah, the description of how that whole the internal ecosystem of just the Kaiju, like not even the world, but just the Kaiju, was beautiful and a ton of fun.
Definitely. And it's interesting how the parasites themselves were kind of the real threat for the humans. Like the Kaiju, I mean, you got to watch out for them. You don't want to get stepped on. But they're kind of benign, you know, in a way. I mean, they can get...
Yeah, humans are... Well, thanks to some of the other science, the pheromones, the Kaiju generally don't care about humans. For one, if they're individual humans, they're too small to care about anyways.
Right.
But
like
for
flies.
two, for their bases, they have pheromones being emitted, which was, if memory serves... I don't think they use the word pheromones, but I want to say...
I think
it was kind of a similar thing in like Godzilla movies on Monster Island.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
That's how they kept the Kaiju away from the base that was on Monster Island.
Well, and I thought it was interesting because every other classic kaiju movie is basically about what if we were the real monsters all along, and KPS comes along and answers yes. Because basically scientists make this incredible discovery, but because they need funding, they're forced to bring in corporate sponsors, which immediately leads to a wealthy pharma bro swooping in with a hostile takeover with plans to harvest, weaponize, and profit off of nature by exploiting and destroying it, which again, very current.
Yeah. One of the other things I think was so beautifully done was it's not specifically like Scalzi's not hard in the corporations are bad, government is bad.
No,
which I think
it's subtle.
sometimes gets lost in a lot of modern things, that it's like, oh, all corporations are evil or governments are just out to get to you.
No,
because he makes it a point.
Yeah.
The whole reason, well, not KPS, but their predecessor existed, which we're never actually given a name of what they were before they were KPS. But the whole reason any of this started was because of nuclear testing in, which atoll was it? The Eniwetok Atoll in the Marshall Islands, which is a real place that we did do actual testing.
You can see the footage on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's nuts.
So yeah, we actually, now the time frame is wrong on this because we did testing in the 70s and 80s. We tested on the Bikini Atoll for Godzilla.
Oh, that's what I'm thinking of. Sorry.
Yeah. But Eniwetok was the so Bikini and Eniwetok were each other's backup.
Yeah. Okay.
So they did testing there. In the book, this is in 1951, they did testing, and it brought a kaiju from this other plane, finds it in their world. Well, I guess like a real quick backup, the way that their science works is if there is enough nuclear energy in our world, the kaiju can sort of use that to appear. They can sense it on their world as food. So they go there, and if the barrier, like essentially it breaks down the barrier, allowing kaiju to come through.
Yeah.
You know,
almost
sometimes
Pacific
not
Rim style, like kind of Pacific Rim style, but like it's not one specific place. It's just wherever the radiation has.
It's like humans have control of this portal, but they didn't realize it.
Yeah.
So this creature comes through in the 50s, and in the same area, it gets seen by Japanese ships as the U.S. Navy is chasing it. And that is where Godzilla comes from.
Yep.
It's not the same Godzilla monster, like visually or in action. But that's, in this book, that is how Godzilla comes about.
I do love how in the book they explain that, like, no, he just kind of died or something, right?
He was there for 3 days and then died.
It's kind of sad.
So the reason why this place even exists is that world leaders got together because they're like, holy shit, this is kind of a pain in the ass to deal with. So the reason why there's like a nuclear agreement that like maybe we shouldn't use nuclear energy or nuclear power or nuclear weapons, I should specify.
Yeah.
Because like plants don't seem to generate enough. It's nuclear explosions that create a tear between dimensions. So the reason why there's like a nuclear peace treaty isn't so that countries don't kill each other. It's so that they don't bring kaiju into the world.
Because that would be worse.
Yeah, because they're like, oh, well, we're going to bomb someone, and then they bring in a kaiju that is a much greater threat than, the country they were trying to stop to begin with.
Exactly.
So I thought that was a really neat little twist of reality. It's also great because it doesn't like venerate anyone.
Yep.
It's like, I mean, we're only doing this for self-preservation, like, because we don't want to fight a kaiju either. Right. Like, we're not going to nuclear bomb you solely because, not because we like you, but because we don't want to fight kaiju that don't give a shit about our weapons.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because it's still mutually assured destruction but it's like a whole different level of it, you know?
Oh yeah,
You can maybe
because they
survive
can't
a
control the kaiju. Yeah, it could still come back.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because it's going to need more food eventually, and it's going to end up coming after, you know, nuclear power plants and stuff. So I love that little setup. But what they ended up learning, like it's not explained, thankfully, but they end up learning how to kind of control these tears.
Yeah.
So much like Skull Island and Monarch.
Yes. It's a lot
They're
like
able
that.
to set up bases. They're able to set up bases around the world so that different areas can monitor the kaijus in those general areas. This takes place in what is roughly the Labrador Peninsula. They have to enter through Greenland and then fly over. And as a quick kind of description, apparently this Earth is also extremely similar in shape to our Earth.
Yes.
Some of the series of events that happened in our history also happened on this Earth's history.
I think
it's just there wasn't anything to wipe out the dinosaurs in their history.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the big event that kind of changes everything, right?
Yeah. So the continents split up roughly the same because they even though it's a separate world, they do refer to everything, like all the locations as to where they would be
In the real world.
like in the U.S. or in our world.
Yeah.
What we're familiar with. So yeah, there's a lot of beauty in how they describe that. Like they go into detail. It's a much hotter area. You know, there's like so many different types of creatures, and apparently some of the smallest bugs have to be swatted at pretty hard.
Oh man.
And then like the next step up is like punching bugs.
Yeah.
So you got to have a good bitch slap hand at like absolute least.
For sure. We get this great scene at one point where Jamie, I guess I assume she's a she. She's a she. Jamie's a she.
I'm pretty sure Jamie is the she in here. Upon further review, Jamie is in fact not provided a gender. Even Scalzi specifically refers to them as they, them. Did he create the perfect insert protagonist where no matter what gender you are, you can just kind of put yourself in their place? Maybe.
But so Jamie, she's training, you know, like they put them out on the ground floor basically, right? And they have to survive or whatever against wave after wave of these things. And I just love that whole part, that description, and how disturbing it sounds.
A lot of the drama in here, in kind of a similar way to Jurassic Park, it comes from the world.
Yeah.
Scalzi does a great job of putting you in the place of Jamie. And Jamie has, you know, a couple of other new people with her. But then anytime they do anything, obviously there are like well-trained people around them. But you are introduced to this where they have to be taught how shitty the world is they live in. Like they need that realization, and they can describe stuff as much as they want, but like once you actually get down on the ground,
like anything else, you need hands-on experience.
So it is really fascinating how they set the world up. The characters are each sent into their own like respective fields.
Jamie lifts things.
Yep. I lift things. Niam is in physics and astronomy. Kaharangi is the geologist, and Aparna is in biology. Yep. Jamie is the main character, of course, but the book does a great job of like handling those other three characters. You know, because they're all new and because they meet each other before they even hit this world or even know what they're actually doing.
That's right.
You know, because it's all very hush hush. But they're all used to great degree. Like no one's ever forgotten, which is wonderful.
It's surprisingly character driven for a kaiju story, if that makes sense.
I guess before going too far into the character handling aspect, but for the rest of the world, it's very well described. You know, everything's set up to where you believe it. Like I said, that it takes place in the Labrador Peninsula, and it's important that we have that relativity because that is the main part of the climax. is, a kaiju ends up appearing in our Labrador Peninsula.
That's right.
So it's a marvelous setup. It's a beautiful and creepy world. It sounds like they have something that's much worse than coconut crabs.
Oh yeah.
Like much more, because it's funny. They're like, oh, there are crabs in trees. And I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting because we already have that, but it's pretty much only in Hawaii, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
That you have to worry about coconut crabs. Am I
That
right?
sounds familiar.
But we do have real world crabs that hang out in trees and they can snap golf clubs in two, because that happens to tourists all the time.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess we should point out the Labrador Peninsula is in Canada, right? Yeah, Quebec, I think.
It is in Canada. Northeast, it is an extremely large and mostly uninhabited part of Canada, at least where they are.
But again, in our world, it's, a tundra, right? It's icy, very cold.
Yeah, it's a frozen tundra.
And there it's basically a jungle.
Yeah, everything sounds... God, it sounds like the entire world is basically like the British or Virgin Isles, like islands off the coast of Florida.
Yeah, like a runaway gas greenhouse effect, maybe. I don't know.
Every part of it is hot, which they make that pretty well known throughout the book too. For the characters, my favorite thing is the ease of which characters' gender, sexuality, and etc. are referenced. I didn't take a note of which one it was, but one of them is only exclusively referred to as they, them. Most of them seem to be hetero, but then you have the pilot of the aircraft, which I'm not going to spoil that part yet.
Oh my God. So good.
But the pilot being two married men, like the way they reference it is great, where it's like, I'm so-and-so. I didn't take notes on that, so sorry to the listeners, but he's like, my co-pilot is this person with the same last name, and he's like, we're not related, we're just married, and they do it. It's done intentionally as like a terrible dad joke.
Yeah. I love it because it's like subtle. It's part of the world. They don't make a big deal about it. Scalzi's really good with that. There is a part early on in the book, like I want to say chapter 2 or 3, where one of the roommates, I think, mentions like being dead named or something by one of the parents or something. And it's just like an offhand reference, for trans terminology and stuff. So. Yeah.
And I also didn't take notes on that, and I mean, I guess that just kind of goes to show the subtleness of it, which is something that I always appreciate.
Yeah, definitely.
Cause I feel like it's pretty bad representation if you feel like you have to hammer something in. Cause like the whole purpose is like people just want to live.
Right.
So why not just say things instead of trying to draw any attention to it?
Yeah, but it's inclusive because like they're very fleshed out real characters,
Oh yeah.
And it doesn't define them. That's the important thing.
Like they're always defined by throughout the entire book, they're always defined by their role.
Their skill set. Yeah.
Their skill set.
Exactly.
Like I said, physics and astronomy, geologist, biology, like that is more important than anything else. And I think one of the things that I also enjoy, there's no dating in this.
Yeah.
It's not a romance in any way, shape, or form. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing normally. But God, I feel like that would have stretched this out in the wrong direction.
Right. It wasn't necessary at all for the story. And I'm glad it wasn't shoehorned in there.
Yeah. And I think the book, if memory serves, the entire story takes place over the course of like 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's pretty quick.
Which they do time it in the book. They give you the actual like length of time from beginning to when shit goes down.
Yeah.
It's very realistic in that people have too much shit to learn.
No time for screwing around.
Yeah. Thank God. Which is why this is a great, I feel like this would be a solid introductory book for someone in their teens.
For sure. Yeah. I don't think there's anything too graphic. Speaking of, screwing around, we do get some kaiju action that I was not expecting, but it was hilarious.
The descriptions of that are very entertaining.
Yes.
In this world, the kaiju are kind of referenced as being dumb like pandas.
Yes.
Sometimes. So they have to create pheromones and then sometimes help the kaiju breed.
Yeah.
When one of them, in this case, one of them is too stupid to like accept the breeding. So it's probably a good time to mention some of the kaiju names.
Oh, yeah.
This particular couple are Edward and Bella, named after Twilight.
Yeah. Some pretty great jokes about that.
Yeah, there are some solid jokes in there. Bella keeps trying to entice Edward, but he keeps taking it as like a territorial dispute. So they let them naturally try a few times, and then when they realize that Edward's too stupid to, get the pick up what Bella's putting down,
Well said.
They decide to intervene, and they let stuff happen, which is hilarious, and it's nondescriptive. It's like descriptively nondescriptive, which is hilarious. It's a great part of the book. And some of the other names, so for this particular couple, it is worth talking about the kaiju themselves. This particular couple, the pilot at the time specified that he wanted to name them Sid and Nancy. Sid Vicious, bassist for Sex Pistols, and Nancy Spungen, his girlfriend, which I feel like would have, like, I kind of like this reference because of how tragic that ended. Nancy Spungen was murdered, and Sid Vicious was initially to blame. I didn't bother looking up how this turned out, but a year later, Sid Vicious overdosed and died. And it's like, I like that was brought up, because it's like, for kaiju, when essentially their mating looks extremely violent, because that's kind of how it's described. Like one of the characters even mentions like, oh shit, they're fighting, and like, oh, they're not fighting.
Which is true of some animals in the real world, like it's one of those weird things.
So I like the what they were, the names they were given, and then the names they were suggested. The other two kaiju of note are Betsy and Kevin.
Yes, Kevin.
Cracked me up. So the kaiju are fun, and they're described in it's like slightly more than maybe what Lovecraft would have done. Though I would say
less is more,
it's Edward and Edward and Bella are described somewhat Lovecraftian, because tentacles are mentioned. Though like they even phrase it as like tentacles is not the right word.
Oh no. That sounds so weird.
But it's like so it is fun because, you get the idea of mass. Some of them are referred to as mountains. Some of them are referred to as like flying dragons. And there's like enough specificity to know that these things are hard to describe. But it's not Lovecraftian in the sense that they're like, oh, the human mind couldn't possibly comprehend it.
Right.
They do go a little bit deeper than that.
Although something the size of a mountain moving would be kind of hard to comprehend. You'd be like trying to wake yourself up. Like, what is happening? Like just trying to put yourself in their shoes. But I love the build up to this. Before they even get there, you hear about like, oh yeah, we're an animal rights group and we protect large animals. And he's like thinking hippos or like elephants. And it's like, no, dude.
Hippos are polar bears, because they know, or not hippo. It's elephants being something big. But then polar bears in Greenland was the commonly referenced thing. It's like, I guess they have polar bears in Greenland. That's the only big thing I can think of. But the descriptors are great. It's fun. And I think a lot of times it's not the specific words used to describe, it's how the actions are described. When like giant wings unfurl from around the body kind of thing, or they talk about spines here and there. Edward and Bella are interesting because it sounds like their eyes are like points of light. And it's like they have a bunch of eyes, and again, like none of this is really hard to describe, but it's like a bunch of glowing lights. But when they focus, all the lights gather into one point, and that's kind of when you know you're fucked.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, well, every like a chameleon zoning in. It's like, yeah, I have no hope because I know that it notices me now.
There's no running from that thing. At least if you're on the ground.
Yeah, there's definitely no running. And I mean, for the most part, it sounds like if they really truly wanted, they could probably take out most of the aircraft here.
Yeah. Oh, and did we mention Tanaka Base?
Yeah, now would actually probably be a solid time to go into some of the rest of the world.
Sure.
So, if you want to talk about some of the bases and structures, I have all the specific notes if you want to introduce us to it.
Sure. So we get I think there's a few different bases that are referred to. The thing I love about it was their naming conventions.
And do you want to spoil that as well? It's straight up mentioned. They straight up say it.
They're literally references to kaiju movies. We get Tanaka Base. I'm trying to remember. Was there Showa? No.
So specifically, the bases, the base that this takes place at is Tanaka Base, named after Tomoyuki Tanaka, the producer for the original Godzilla. Yeah. They have Honda Base.
That was the one I was trying to think of.
Yeah. I think Honda Base is the one in Greenland.
That's right. Yep.
Because I think that's where they came from, was Honda Base, named after Ishido Honda, who's the director of Godzilla. Yep. And then they offhandedly mention Nakajima Base, named after Haruo Nakajima, the suit actor for Godzilla.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And then one, like, I actually had to look it up, but Chuko Kita Base.
Oh.
And the art directors for the original Godzilla film are Takeo Kita and Satoru Chuko.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was like, what a really neat, like, you know, it's usually always the same names. Like, I am surprised that Tsuburaya didn't get a name in here. But, like,
saving that nobody...
for the sequel. Yeah. But nobody really thinks about some of the other major roles in movie making. So I thought it was great that the art directors got their own shout out in
and
here.
They deserved it. That was actually the only reference I didn't get. I'm sorry I couldn't remember offhand, but yeah, Honda Base, Tanaka, and Nakajima
are like the easy three.
Yeah, which is
like I said,
good.
I had to look it up because I had no idea, but I was like, I know these names are important because they do straight up say that they were all named after people who worked on the original Godzilla film. So, you know, Godzilla is referenced a couple of times. It's pretty much only in like 2 chapters. Yeah. But you can tell that Godzilla was a very large part.
Huge inspiration.
So some of the other things that are brought up, did Shobijin mean anything to you?
That sounds so familiar. Remind me.
Yeah, you wouldn't hear it often because they have a different name, I guess, in different movies.
Sure.
So the Shobijin are the twins.
Oh, the Mothra twins?
Yeah, the Mothra twins.
Oh, okay.
They're also often called the Cosmos, so it kind of depends on which movie you're watching.
Yeah.
But yeah, Shobijin is an airship in the book, and it's just mentioned. Nothing is ever said about it, so it's one of those that, like, if you don't know what Shobijin means, it's just going to go right over your head until you look it up.
Yeah, I'm a bad fan. That went right over my head.
Actually, I didn't pick up on any other ones other than what they like explicitly mention. Yeah. Well, except for the beginning, they mentioned Deliberator, and they do straight up mention Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash.
That's right. Snowpiercer, right? Or no, it's Snow Crash. Snow Crash. My bad. Snow Crash.
Yeah, Snow Crash is actually the first cyberpunk novel I ever read.
Oh, nice.
It is a wild one. I think it's I'm not going to get too tangential,
sure,
but it is a solid introduction because of kind of how crazy it is at points where it's like, yeah, some of them do get this crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, the delivery people for Food Mood are called Deliverators, which is a term that he coined. One of the things they do straight up address is Murderbot, which is in reference to the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells.
Oh, cool.
I haven't read it. It's on the list.
I need to add that one.
And those books actually, it's like current too. So I kind of love his range.
Oh, yeah.
But the Murderbot Diaries began in 2017. And by the time he started writing this book, she was 5 or 6 books deep, like already out into the public.
Oh, that's fast.
Yeah. So there were like 2 or 3 released in 2018 alone. The last pop culture reference that I have that, again, they do straight up announce are the transdimensional portals.
Yeah.
Which comes from Doom Eternal, which was released in, I think, like, it was released in March of 2020.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't catch that. I was just assuming it was like a Stargate thing or something. I don't know.
Yeah, they do call it out, but again, it's just one of those, like the guy says the name and they're like, you stole that from Doom Eternal. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But it's basically a replay of the Deliberator dialogue in the beginning.
Yeah. There's a lot of good stuff like that. He's really great with the pop culture references. They come in naturally in dialogue, which is like the best way to do that.
And then generally, like in the cases, well, actually in the cases where they're announced, it's always relevant. So like Deliberator and Transdimensional Portal are stolen names from something else. It's used in character development.
Yes.
For the person who is stealing them. And it's just being straight up announced. And then again, like the Godzilla stuff is like, this was something that was very unexpected. This world changing event that happened. So why not name everything after like the kaiju film?
Right. And what's great about all of that, like the fact that the same events that kind of inspired the real life Godzilla movie are used as like kind of the background for this entire story. And it feels very appropriate because almost every Japanese Godzilla movie uses the original Godzilla movie, Gojira, as like canon. Almost everyone uses that movie as canon, even if none of the other ones exist in that timeline, you know? So it almost felt like a reference to that, the fact that it's sort of loose canon that it happened.
Yeah. Which is, it makes it fun because it's like a soft science thing.
Exactly. It's like a more realistic
and people don't know about
happened.
It. Yeah. Well, and kind of like their safety net was the movie being made.
Yes. It's almost like a PR
it's like,
thing.
oh, well, yeah. It's like, the movie, it wasn't made, with intent of being like a PR thing, but it's like, well, now it just seems fictional. So if people bring it up, they're going to be like, yeah, the movie, right?
Exactly.
Like when that giant monster invaded Japan. Yeah, that was a movie. Like no one's ever going to believe that it's a real world thing.
Exactly.
Because the only evidence is a movie.
Yeah, totally. And it as crazy as some of these details seem, that part of it seemed probable. Their whole keeping this secret thing. It's like as long and like the whole, they don't let you like bring cameras and stuff. You're not allowed to bring your cell phone or whatever, right? That was one of the rules, I want to say.
They have cell phones, but they're useless.
Yeah.
Because they can't.
Oh, of course, there's no
service.
GPS. Yeah, there's no satellites in orbit on Kaiju Earth, I would imagine, right? So
yeah, and there's no way
to get it
contact people to the other side because they do also, again, like I feel like Scalzi covers a lot of these bases where it's like it takes weeks to get anything to the real world.
Yeah.
Because it's not like they can just flip a switch. It's that they're shut off, at shortest weeks at a time, leading into months before they can even send a message, which is why they always have two crews working all the time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and they're told to pack light. All those kind of details like really made it feel like he thought this thing out, like
yeah. For something that he came up with in a pretty short span of time, like he covered a lot of bases, and that's what makes me interested in reading more Scalzi.
Definitely. Do we want to talk about favorite scenes?
Yeah. So go ahead, lay your favorite scene on me.
All right. So I think the scene that had the biggest impact to me, really kind of nailed the whole theme of the book, was where the 1%er villain, who I keep forgetting his name, he's trying.
Oh God, I didn't even.
Yeah,
write it
he
down.
sucks. That's all you need to know about him. He's trying to goad the helicopter pilot, who you did mention his name.
No, I didn't mention him by name.
Sorry.
And I forgot to write.
He was a good
down,
character, but anyways, it doesn't matter. So he's trying to goad the helicopter pilot into landing in a dangerous area, and he tries to pay him off basically. So the pilot's like, okay, he lands, and then he tells him to get the fuck out of the helicopter. And he refuses to take his money. And it was just such an awesome like mic drop moment. it felt really cathartic, like just telling this guy, you know, your money's worthless here, you know?
Yeah, and it's, you know, they make it a point where it seems like a lot of these people are pretty altruistic, where like the only reason they are here is to help the kaiju.
Exactly.
And it's not something we went into because it's not something that's ever really like blatantly addressed, but we went from not dropping bombs because we're afraid of the kaiju coming here to coming here to try to help the kaiju.
Genuinely caring for them, yeah. Which is awesome.
So all of these people who are here, they're pretty small crews. Like, I think each crew individually might be something resembling a skeleton crew, but then they always have two of them at a time. Because I don't think the number's ever mentioned, but there's not a ton of people on the base. And on even the original base that exploded, which is mentioned a couple times in the book, I think they said there were only 60 people there.
Oh, okay.
So it's not, you know, unless they have changed it, there's not really a ton of people actually here. But again, all of them are here for one specific purpose. And they're all paid very well. So it's like his money like isn't going to change any of their lives. And again, they can't spend it here anyways.
Exactly.
So they're being paid to stay here, and the money they are making, they can't use for 6 months at a time.
Right.
So it's like 100% savings, you know?
Exactly. But even so, like, it doesn't matter how much this guy would offer him. Like, it wasn't about the money. You know, it was
always about the kaiju.
Yeah, and he was just being a dick, you know?
Yeah.
So I love that.
So that, I'm trying to think, man, I don't know. There is a lot of fun. There are a lot of fun scenes. I think for me, maybe some of the action sequences, like when they're first out monitoring kaiju. And actually, yeah, that's, I think in chapter 6 with the Shobijin, when they actually start seeing it, that like Jurassic Park reveal.
Yes.
Where they see the kaiju and, you know, get, they don't get it directly attacked, but they do happen to be in the way of two kaiju fighting for dominance. And like the descriptions of how just easy it is for them to tear up like entire forests in one go.
Yeah. And how clever is it that we got a book that has a kaiju fight in it that, you know, actually works, you know? Like, how do you do that in book form? Like, it's easy in movies, but like they really worked it into the storyline, you know, in a great way.
Oh yeah. It's good timing. And then again, not overly descriptive, but just descriptive enough to make it fun. The action sequences are fun. Like other than that, it's hard to pick out a specific point because I feel like there are so many fun moments in it.
Definitely.
So I guess, is there anything in particular that you don't like about the book? Is there anything that you wish would be changed or different?
Man, that's tough. Cause like part of me wishes the book was longer, you know, like more in depth. Like I would read, you know, who knows if he's going to do a sequel. I don't know that it needs a sequel, but if he came out with one, I would definitely read it. You know what I mean? Like it just felt like I like that it was short, but at the same time, that's probably the worst thing about it. Cause it's like, oh, I need more of this. I need more of this in my life. Cause it seems like it should be a genre, but it's not, at least in book form.
And I'll agree with that because I feel like it was a very, like I'm glad it's over, but I wish there was more. Like it is a concrete ending,
which is a good thing to be, you know, like wanting more.
Yeah.
You know?
So my only actual complaints are probably going to come from the audiobook.
Okay.
Because it's audio, you can't read how food mood is spelled.
Yes. I heard about that later. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole point in the book, and this is kind of where things like I love audiobooks, I listen to a lot, but there are limitations.
Yeah.
But food mood is spelled FUDMUD, and there are umlauts over the U's.
Yes.
So it looks like FUD-MUD.
Yeah.
And that's even like addressed in the book, like briefly. So you don't understand what they're talking about when that's brought up. It's early on and it's not a big deal, but that's one of those things that it's like, man, I really wish there was a way to like, you know, or maybe in the audiobook only they might like spell it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like they should make an exception for stuff like that. because it's a visual.
That being the only difference when it is very specifically about a visual part of the medium. And for me personally, I didn't really like Will Wheaton's reading of it.
Really? Okay.
I'm not going to say it's bad.
Yeah.
Like I would still recommend that people listen to the audiobook, but that also might be because we read
the physical copy first. That makes sense.
Yeah. So like things sound different in my head. And then with him listening to it, again, it's not atrocious. There's nothing wrong with it. It just comes down to like preference.
Yeah.
And because I've listened to so many audiobooks at this point, like I do have opinions on who I like to listen to and what I like to hear.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend like Scott Brick. That'd be way too intense. But there are some lighter. I feel like I want someone in the middle. Like when Will Wheaton starts getting excited, I feel like his pitch goes way beyond what I really care to listen to.
I understand that. I will say, I hated Ready Player 2. I loved Ready Player 1. I hated Ready Player 2. But Will Wheaton, to me, he made that one manageable to get through. His audio
That's
on that.
funny.
Yeah.
I might actually have to. I really don't want anything to do with that book.
I
but just to
regret
compare
buying
his voice.
I regret buying it. It's that bad.
Man, Eric, you've got Libby. You can download books from your local library.
I wish I had done that, honestly. Yeah, because I knew going in, like, everyone hated it. I was like, I need to form my own opinion. And I'm like, no, I don't. After the fact.
Yeah, and then you listen to it, and it's like, God damn it. Why did I do this?
Yeah.
Outside of that, I think the only other... Yeah, we've touched on all the notes I had and some of the notes I didn't have.
I do have a few more, but it's more about...
Go ahead with some of the other stuff.
Sure. So, a couple things. I would honestly be surprised if this doesn't get picked up as a movie. They barely have to change anything to translate it to the big screen. And I almost wonder if he wrote it that way. Like, because I could see someone picking up the movie rights to this, and it's short enough that you wouldn't really have to cut anything, I don't think, In
the afterword, he does say thanks also to Matthew Sugarman and Joel Gottler for their work on the film/TV side of things.
That's right.
He does. So I looked it up, and this book was optioned to Fox Entertainment in January of 2022 before the book released.
Wow, that's awesome.
But it was optioned as a TV series.
Huh. Okay.
Now, which I think is great.
That could be awesome.
Yeah, I feel like it could be more fun. And when you talk about the book being longer, I feel like a short TV series, like 8 episodes, 45-minute episodes, I feel like you could expand a little bit more on some of the world, maybe add in some stuff.
Well, and they'd have to a little bit, just visually,
And I think, because when I saw that, I was like, man, it'd be kind of fun as a movie, but like, I don't want to sit through a friggin' trilogy, and I don't know how well it would do.
True.
Now, the downside to this is that doesn't really mean anything. There's nothing that's been updated. It's been over a year. And again, they took this before the book had even released.
Right. And
sure
stuff gets optioned all the time that never ends up getting made. It gets stuck in development hell or whatever. In fact, Red Shirts, they were talking about possibly doing a series at one point, and it hasn't come out yet. So I don't know if it's ever coming out, like who knows,
So I can only hope. I would like to see, even if they do just do a movie, I still think it'd be fun. Like, I would prefer a TV series, but I would absolutely go to the theater to watch this.
Oh, yeah. Just imagine
I do
this on
hope
IMAX.
something, I hope something more comes from it. Maybe a sequel, maybe, like I said, TV or movie about the book that we have.
I don't want a sequel if it's something he's forced to write. I want him, like, if he wants to write more, I want to read it. You know what I mean? Like, there has to be a reason, again, because there's so much, like, well, not so much, but there is a little bit of a deeper meaning behind the story, and that's what matters to me,
Yeah, and I feel like Scalzi has the history to not be pushed around.
Yeah.
Like, he's an established enough author.
Oh, for sure.
That I think he can say no. We should talk about the afterward, because...
Yes.
And now that we're at this point, when like clearly I really enjoy this book, but when I first read it, there was something that just felt off about it. I was like, I don't know. I was expecting something. It was expectations.
Right.
I was expecting something maybe that hit a little bit harder, that, was a little bit deeper than what feels like YA.
Yeah. Well, and again, that was my problem with Red Shirts. My expectations going in, I thought it was one thing, it ended up being something else. Sorry.
So, I mean, there's literally, like, I hadn't even read, like, I just saw the name of this.
Yeah.
And I was aware that he'd done Old Man's War and, Forever Wars, and was told about those. And I didn't read a synopsis or anything because I did want to go in blind. And I was kind of like, not disappointed, but I was like, I don't know, it just feels like this could have been more. But then I read the afterword.
Oh yeah.
And
that's where it's at.
The afterword kind of explains it. And in short, that a lot of stuff going on in the world, and a lot of stuff going on in his personal life, and in his professional life.
Oh yeah.
And this book was written just to be fun. It was supposed to be lighthearted. It was supposed to help Scalzi himself come out of kind of a funk. And when I read that, I was like, I really wish that this part were like the foreword.
Oh yeah.
Maybe not the entire afterword and thanks, but like, because then I would have felt a little bit differently about it. I guess I would have known the energy with which it was written.
Definitely.
But it did make the second read, listen, a lot more entertaining.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I really enjoyed it the first time, and I've read it or listened to it, I guess, a few times by now. I actually want to get a physical copy now. But yeah, the absolute best part of the book, oddly enough, was the afterword. It was just so well written. It was so heartfelt and just true, like this is what this guy was going through. And he wasn't, what do you call it? He wasn't sugarcoating it. He was like, this shit was hard. And I like that he points out, like, it's not just about me, like the whole world was going through a rough time, but like, damn, like I couldn't write like this dark, depressing, whatever project he was working on, because it felt there was too much of that in the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and also, and like, I can relate to this all too well. He'd written, I think he said like 4,000 words. And then when he opened up, and this was contracted. He does go into description that this was contracted. The publishers had already agreed to do it. They already had the cover art, like everything was ready to go for this contracted book.
Yeah.
And the next morning, he opens up the document and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And he was certain that he'd saved it twice. And I've been in that position before with photos. So I get that like soul crushing moment of like, it's just not worth it. Like in your mind, it's like, I know I can, but like, I'm just fucking not.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, you're not going to get you're not going to recapture that same energy. It's gone, it's passes, it's just what it is. And I actually had a moment like that earlier where like, I went to open my notes, for, this episode, and it's like, there's nothing here. But as a writer though, the pandemic, like I could relate to this, the pandemic was the worst kind of writer's block. Like, I don't know how to describe it. And it felt like he really was in a similar headspace. I mean, I'm no John Scalzi, but like, yeah, it really hit me hard, like on a visceral level,
which is, I think, important. We're both creatives in our own way.
Exactly.
And I think that really helped, like get both of us even more into it.
Definitely.
And yeah, again, like I didn't dislike the book. It was the expectations thing, until I read the afterword, and it's like, man, I love a good afterword. This is probably one of the first ones that really stood out, that I've read. And then like more recently, A Scanner Darkly.
Oh, Philip K. Dick, right?
Yeah, that afterward, like I really enjoyed the book, and then that afterward just kicks you right in the dick.
Doesn't it just explain everything or something?
I mean, actually, much like this, it puts it into a real world perspective.
Yeah.
A fictional book that to some degree Scanner Darkly has a lot of very real world basis. But as far as Kaiju Preservation goes, the afterword puts the theme and like why it's not super dramatic into perspective.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want it to be a dark and brooding book. Because he could have just written, you know, the next Jurassic Park. Not that his previous book was going to be kaiju based.
Yeah.
Like the one that he gave up on.
Right.
Or at least temporarily retired. But if this book were any more brooding, it would just be Jurassic Park.
Right, exactly.
You know?
Yeah, it was light and fun, you know, which is what I needed at the time when I read it too. It's like,
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, same, like the reason that I didn't read this immediately is because I was in the middle of reading some of the Drizzt books.
Okay.
Which those are certainly a little bit more intense than this is.
Yeah.
Not the most intense thing that I've read, but they are intense.
Yeah.
And then when I read this, it was one of those that I was still expecting darker. And yeah, but it is a great popcorn read. Like I've told a lot of people about it. And it's like, look, weekend read, done. Like if you're a fast reader, you'll be done in a day.
Yeah. And the audiobook's pretty dang short, I want to say.
Like 6.5 hours.
Yeah. It's like nothing.
Yeah.
Definitely not Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. And that does include the afterword, like the entire audiobook. Everything is, 6.5 hours, something like that. But no, this is an absolute recommend.
For sure.
I hadn't thought about it, but are there any other, if someone likes this, what would you recommend?
Ooh, again, you're throwing the hard questions. I should have thought of that.
I know. I should have thought of this, not immediately.
No, you're good. That's a good question. More Scalzi, honestly. Like, if you like his style, I think you'll really dig Red Shirts. Especially, if you're a fan of sci-fi in general, Old Man's War is, I think, one of the best ones I've read of his. Jurassic Park, Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park. Yeah, like it's a way more dense story, like a lot more hard science goes into that one. But again, it has that sense of adventure, and that is still probably my favorite book of all time. So I always recommend it. And it sounds like Scalzi's next book is going to be pretty awesome as well.
Yeah, he does have...
he's got his hooks in me at this point. His
next book looks like it's kind of... Do you think it's going to be a perspective from the Bond villain?
So the book, his next one is called Starter Villain. And to me, it definitely looks, I mean, it's obvious, right? It's so in your face about it. It's an ode to Bond villains. Like Dr. Evil, sorry, No, wait, that's Blofeld. Blofeld's basically on the cover.
Yeah, because Blofeld's like with the cat.
Yeah. It's a silhouette of Blofeld.
But it's a villain in a nice office chair with a cat in his lap.
It's got me so hyped. Again, listen to Podcasters Assemble. We did a whole freaking Bond season. We love this shit. It's like he's writing books for us.
Oh, yeah.
I'm really interested to see how he plays with that one. It seems, again, like in the same vein as this one and Red Shirts, where it's probably going to be very surface level of fun, short read, but there's going to be themes about stuff. It's going to have a deeper meaning to it. And I imagine that with this one, a smart thing to do would be to play with like geopolitics a little bit, because that's sort of a theme in Bond movies sometimes, but they never really go for a deep kind of examination of that, and this would be a cool way to do that.
And I feel like he could handle that well, because in KPS there's very little of it, but he comes in swinging pretty hard. Towards the end of the book, there's a couple of moments where it is like
not quite Communist Manifesto, but no.
Yeah, but like his tongue is so hard into his cheek, he's almost pushing through it.
Yes.
Like pushing through the flesh.
Yeah.
And I thought it was great. Like, again, it's not expounded upon. This is not the book for that,
which is good.
But the situations are still there, and I wonder if the Bond, the villain in KPS is Rob Sanders.
Oh yeah.
And I'm kind of wondering, what a shitty name.
What if it's
unless your name is Rob Sanders in real life? I like you. But I kind of wonder if this next book isn't almost going to be from like that Rob Sanders perspective.
That's what I was kind of thinking, that like, what if it's connected, you know? Like,
yeah.
oh,
where
man.
it's like a soft prequel, probably.
Could be.
Or maybe it's the interim story in between when we first meet Rob and, well, no, it'd be like the prequel because he becomes a billionaire in the beginning of KPS. So,
yeah.
But I think that would be a lot of fun, where it's absolutely not related, but you could definitely compare the two characters.
You know, I always thought it would be interesting to see, and who knows what he's doing with this story. We don't have a lot to go off of yet. But what if it's like a Bond movie from the villain's perspective, where the villain comes out on top? You know, and maybe Bond's the asshole, maybe Bond's the real villain, but everyone thinks this guy's the villain. And he's like, no, dude, like, look at this guy. He's breaking treaties and, you know, like killing people and all this stuff, you know, like.
Oh, yeah, because he's.
I'm just trying to make a better world, you know?
Yeah, he's always doing the right. Yeah, I know. The villain is being. I guess
villainized. Yeah,
like, villainized.
Well, in the MCU does that a lot, where it's like the villain kind of had a good point. You know, Killmonger was right. You know, Magneto. You know.
Yeah. Hashtag Killmonger did nothing wrong.
Exactly. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that. And I would agree with references. Jurassic Park is probably the easiest thing to reference because it is very much. You know, it's otherworldly. Like it all takes place on, you know, in the real world, unlike this one, which is like crosses dimensions. But I mean, it's the same thing. Jurassic Park is roughly the same thing, where they're not told anything. You know, it's hinted at a lot. You know, they get the people for the job. They hint at stuff.
A lot of build up.
Yeah, a lot of build up. You know, again, not too much, because like JP is pretty perfectly paced.
Oh yeah.
Film wise, the book gives away a bunch of stuff in the first chapter.
It does. It does. Yeah. But it also takes longer to get to the island in the book.
But it's very much the same. It's otherworldly. You know, it's being introduced to something that should never exist, kind of thing. You know, all
man
that drama.
Shouldn't meddle.
Yeah. But it is. I think in a very real way, it's the nega Jurassic Park, because Jurassic Park is like, man hasn't learned his lesson, and, you know, there's a lot of death and stuff. And then this book is, man did learn his lesson.
Yeah.
But there are still some people out there that are assholes, you know, and it's very lighthearted.
Yeah, definitely.
So, not that it's perfect. Again, there is some drama stuff that happens in here, but overall, thematically, it's lighthearted.
Definitely.
But I think that pretty much wraps up everything that I wanted to touch on about the book. Were there any last things?
I mean, other than plugs?
Yeah, so let's get on with plugs. Eric, for starters, plug all the things that are directly related to this, and then go about the rest of it.
All right. If you guys haven't already, definitely check out our Kongzillathon season over at Podcasters Assemble, where Corey and I did a movie countdown to Godzilla vs. Kong. It was a lot of fun. If you enjoyed this episode, I think you'll really get a kick out of that stuff. And I can't wait to hear you, Corey, cover more kaiju content here on The World of My Burrito.
Hopefully we'll get more in there.
Yeah.
You know, we've covered a lot. Like the Kongzillathon directly relates to this. You know, we do have, are they Patreon exclusive episodes on Jurassic Park?
No, all that stuff's out on the main feed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, check out the episodes on Jurassic Park as well.
That's right. I totally skipped over that.
Because we cover, all 6 movies. Did we cover all 6 movies?
We covered everything. Yeah, we did.
Oh my God. Yeah. Because I know we did.
There was bonus episodes like on the, so the book episode was a bonus episode on the Patreon. We also did one on the video games, things like that, but the movies are all on the main feed.
Yeah. So be sure to check those out for sure. And then, you know, obviously nuclear history is kind of a soft part of this, and you cover a lot. That gets covered in Epik Fails of History.
It definitely does. In fact, the next episode, I'm not sure when this one's coming out, but hopefully episode 30 will be out by then, which is all about nuclear fails. Of course, we've covered the Cuban Missile Crisis on previous episode, but I'm pretty proud of this next one. I think it's going to be a good one. Lots of scary and hilarious topics on that one.
Always looking forward to it. So be sure to check out Epik Fails of History, Epic with a K.
That's right.
And yeah, where else can people find you? I guess for things that aren't related to this.
Sure. Well, you can find me all over social media at Erik Slader. That's Erik with the K, Slader with the D. D is in Delta. And speaking of books, my latest book, $22.99, is now available on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and audio form through Audible. Which is basically a film noir style detective story in space. It's nothing like this book, but it is short, even shorter than this one. It's a novella.
Yeah, and I think when I looked at it on Audible, it's 2 hours on the dot.
Exactly 2 hours. Yep.
Yeah. Like what a hard number to have.
Yep.
And then what you still do Too Young for This Trek? Is that still going on?
Sure. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you wanted me to plug everything.
Yeah. Have at it.
So yeah, you can also find me on Too Young for This Trek, which is a Star Trek podcast. Oh yeah, sorry. I was trying to think of what I had covered already. I'm also on Comic Zombie with Chris Carroll, talking about comic books, comic book movies, and everything in between, as well as the Super Switch Club, a Nintendo podcast. And we're wrapping up Banjo-Kazooie right now on that one, and we'll be covering a lot of stuff over the next few months after that. So definitely give that a listen.
I'll have to check. I never played Banjo-Kazooie, so I would rather listen to your reviews on it.
Listen to our frustrations with the terrible graphics and controls. It's a pretty fun game if you can get past that, but yeah.
That day and age, man.
Oh, yeah.
Other than that, yeah, I think that's about it. So, Erik, thanks again for joining me, bud.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Anytime, man. This is great.
Before I fully wrap this burrito up and pat it on the bottom and send it away, let's cover some very important news real quick. I think in my last official episode, I commented on a new Gamera series having been announced. Well, the official Gamera Rebirth trailer has since dropped, and I am super hype. Go check it out on the Netflix YouTube channel. Secondly, if you're a fan of tokusatsu, then you're aware Hideaki Anno's Shin Kamen Rider released this past March. Oh well, AMC has a placeholder page for that new movie at the end of May. Hopefully that means something, because I would love to watch that. By placeholder, I mean there's like literally no info. It's got a date, but there's not even like images or anything. It's truly just a placeholder for the name, and it's the last day of May, which I haven't even looked at a calendar if that's a normal movie day, but whatever. I'm hyped. Go watch the Japanese trailers. Okay, well now is as good a time as any for Nacho Business, because it's my business. As always, though my episodes take forever to release, it is not for a lack of consumption. I started and finished Devilman Grimoire, and damn, what a read. I can't wait to do a Devilman episode one day, because I don't even fucking know why. It is one of my favorite Japanese franchises. Also in manga, I've been catching up on Kaiju number 8 and reading a little bit of Tatsuki Fujimoto's early content. This is the guy who did Chainsaw Man. I still haven't begun the new Chainsaw Man arc, but there's probably enough for me to start reading it and hold out my interest for a couple of hours. As for anime, I recently discovered that Mashle, Magic and Muscles has very recently been animated, which took me by surprise. I recommended the manga last year, the year before sometime, and will recommend the anime for those who aren't down to read. It's only one episode so far, so don't worry about a lengthy investment. And it does get better. It is very entertaining. Maybe you won't end up watching all of it or even reading all of it, but the first solid chunk of it is really entertaining. Yu Yu Hakusho is blessing my eyeballs for the third time in my life. What a great fucking show. Just hit the semifinals of the Dark Tournament, and it just keeps getting better. This is one of the few anime where I genuinely love the American dub. And now that there's time behind my life experiences, think it may have the best next episode announcements of any show ever created. Really, it's just a ton of fun. Honorable mentions are the OG Bubblegum Crisis and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Stone Ocean, both of which I go through pretty slowly. This is just like an I'm bored or like a lunch thing. They're wonderful, but I don't want to ruin the experience by sucking it all in at once, you know what I mean? Lastly, I finally finished Gundam Witch from Mercury. 10 out of 10 recommend. It's very different from any other Gundam, and season 1 is very slice of life, totally unexpected, while also doing the usual Gundam thing, setting up some very, very big political things. Many episodes have a post-credit scene, particularly the last episode, which is not a cliffhanger, but it will gotta change your opinions that you have probably developed through the entire series to that point. If you know, you know, and I am really excited to see what the fuck they do with that. I feel like that's enough for this round.